Ta-da!
Hello and welcome to the Epic Love Show. This is episode 93. My name is Travis Suit, and my guest this evening, we have the amazing, the one and only Evelyn Doherty from Stand Up Journal. She will be joining us shortly. The Epic Love Show is brought to you by the Piper's Angels Foundation for Cystic Fibrosis. In studio here with me, I've got off camera the lovely Danny Devine sharing this energy and space, and the one and only DJ Jason Fisher.
I thought it was Epic Jokester now.
The Epic Jokester.
I told Pipe Man earlier today I'm going to have an identity crisis with this show. I'm going to make it changed every single week. I was starting to get nervous because when you started to say lovely, I'm like, wait a minute, you know, I know we kind of have that relationship working together, but I didn't know how you're going to introduce us this week.
Well, does that work? That works for you, right?
You know?
All right, yeah. I like it. So you can listen to the Epic Love Show each week, either on YouTube Live, which I encourage you to go subscribe, and you can set a reminder on YouTube Live, or on our Epic Love Show Facebook page. You can listen live on w4cy.com. And if you want to listen to this interview or share it with anybody afterwards, you can check it out on Spotify, Pandora, and iHeartRadio. Want to thank everybody every week for tuning in to the Epic Love Show. Really appreciate the support and all of the awesome comments and feedback. We love to see it, all the engagement. Thank you to everybody out there in the online world tuning in. And Jason.
Yeah.
The Epic Jokester.
Yeah.
Do you have any epic dad jokes ready for us this week?
I do, but you want to off air challenged by our guest tonight.
That's true.
I don't know if we have time to
All right, let's wait. Let's wait.
All right.
Okay, I like it. So the theme for this month really is about the crossing for cystic fibrosis, the paddling community, because this month, typically on Father's Day weekend, the Piper's Angels Foundation is producing the crossing for cystic fibrosis. It's an 80-mile paddle challenge from the Bahamas to Florida. This would have been the 5th year we would have done the event, and it's all in an effort to fundraise for the cystic fibrosis community, the Piper's Angels Foundation, and our programs. And we've got hundreds of people. We've got dozens and dozens of boats ready to go to the Bahamas. But because of the current climate and the health crisis, we did have to postpone this year to next year in June. So we would normally be a couple weeks out from the event, and we would be in a much different state of operations, getting ready to produce this huge logistical challenge of an event. And so right now we are casting our vision towards the future and towards next year, but really still honoring what we do with the event, which is celebrate our cystic fibrosis warriors, the people who inspire us to paddle across the ocean, those battling cystic fibrosis and their challenges they're facing every day, and the families that we support, and honoring them. And we typically do a paddle out ceremony when we're in Bimini And we do that as a way as a unification of the community that comes together to honor their lives, those who have passed, those who are alive, and those in the future that will be challenged with cystic fibrosis. So with that in mind, I do want to just share a little bit about the vision of the Epic Love Show. So the Epic Love Show is on episode 93. We're nearing 100 episodes. And every week, this show improves in some form or fashion, whether it's the audio visual capabilities through Talk4 TV and having the lighting and the cameras and the ticker scrolling across the screen, and the audience grows each week as well. And what I want to set as a vision for everybody to hold with this show is, wouldn't it be nice? Let's imagine that every week we come together as a global community, people from all over the world who love hearing inspiring stories of love through action, who love hearing positive news, and we put that intention and we hold this space as a sacred, divine space each week together. And then we put that vibration of love and we put those examples of love in the stories that inspire us. Because when you are witness to inspiration, when you hear an inspiring story, the first time I spoke with another father with a child with cystic fibrosis, and I heard his story about how he rallied the community and fundraised and was doing so much to make an amazing social impact, that changed my perspective. It opened me up to the possibilities. And I want this show to do that. So if you're one of those diehard Epic lovers who's been tuning in every week and you enjoy the show, you enjoy our guests, please share the show. Maybe tell one friend next week, hey, why don't you tune into the show? It's filled with good vibes, positive news, amazing guests, and that's what we want to share out into the world in any way possible, whatever form of sharing that is. Maybe you just share the story of Evelyn's story from Stand Up Journal tonight and how she got to where she is and the inspiring story she shares. So I just want everybody to hold that vision with me as we go forth in the jungles of time and space to keep bringing epic love to the world. Thank you all for tuning in. All right. Is Evelyn ready?
I think so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Evelyn Doherty from the Stand Up Journal. She's the editor and publisher, and Stand Up Journal is a global hub in both print and digital media for water lovers. Stand Up Journal is committed to changing the world by inspiring in people a love of water and recreational water sports, and by encouraging them to become stewards to protect it. Evelyn also serves as press officer for the APP World Tour, and prior to purchasing Stand Up Journal, Evelyn spent 8 years leading the charge on the East Coast stand-up paddle racing circuit, competing in events from Puerto Rico all the way to Vermont. And before becoming a stand-up paddle racer, Evelyn spent 12 years in the New York public school system teaching high school English. Evelyn is based on Long Island, New York, and can be found most mornings paddling on South Gardeners Bay or charging the surf like she will be tomorrow morning with friends off of Ditch Plains Beach in Montauk. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn from Stand Up Journal, welcome to the Epic Love Show.
Hey, Travis, it's so good to see you. And thank you so much for having me on the show. As I told you before, I'm more excited about being on the Epic Love Show than I have been for any interview in a long, long time. So get ready, because I'm ready to share some good stories. I'm also ready to ask you a ton of questions.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that, and thank you for saying that. That is a great compliment coming from you. Hey, did you know that my mom was an English teacher as well?
Oh, no, I didn't know that. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you're so articulate, so good job, Mom.
Thank you. And thank you, Mom, for tuning in each week. She's my #1 fan.
As it should be. That's awesome.
Well, welcome to the show. And so this month, we're talking about paddling and about the crossing as a part of celebrating this month and what we do with honoring people in the cystic fibrosis community. And
Yeah.
as a media partner with Stand Up Journal, you have done an amazing job sharing the inspiring stories of CF warriors that participate in the crossing. And you have some awesome articles on standupjournal.com. So I encourage everybody to go read them and check them out. So I'm just curious, because you have gotten to this place in your life where you are the queen of Stand Up Journal. And you do such a divine job bringing these amazing stories and content. So I'm curious, take me back to the first time you were on a paddleboard.
Oh, wow, Travis, that's a trick question. You didn't tell me you were going to ask that. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, and I mean this from the heart, that Stand Up Journal is actually super, super honored to be a media partner with the Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis. It's one of my favorite events to talk about and to cover. I haven't even had a chance to cover it, right? Like, we haven't had a chance to get down there and actually work together for the event itself. And I can't wait for 2021 because I'm coming, I'm going to bring a team. We're going to figure out how to paddle across that ocean and be a part of the larger family. And that's something I've been looking forward to for a long time. So just so you know, training has started here in New York for June of 2021. And I don't know if I'm going to do the full 80 miles, but I'm going to definitely be a part of a team that does it. So that's really important to me because you guys, I think the work you do is absolutely incredible and inspirational. And everybody I talk to that's associated with the crossing is full of that energy, of that, just absolute incredible love, for one another and for what you're doing. So thanks for letting us be a part of it. All right, back to paddleboarding. So the first time I was on a paddleboard, the first time I was on a paddleboard, I had a friend of mine, no, I'll need to backtrack. So I'm a surfer, and I've been a surfer now for, I don't know, over a decade anyway, right? Probably about 12 to 15 years, and completely obsessed with it. And I had a summer several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, where I had a really bad neck injury. I had a nerve that was firing in my neck that wouldn't let go. And it actually benched me, like I couldn't surf anymore. So I was miserable for a long time with that. And I had a friend of mine during the course of the time that I couldn't surf because I couldn't arch my neck. He completely convinced me to try stand-up paddling, and I didn't want to because I'm a surfer, man. Like, I don't do that stuff. And he put me on a board. He convinced me to do it. He put me on a board and took me on a paddle here in East Hampton, New York, from Ditch Plains in Montauk to the Montauk Lighthouse. And it was one of the most beautiful paddles to this day that I've ever done. Just offshore, towering bluffs, sea life, rolling swells. I fell in probably 30 times, in that 4-mile stretch. And when I came back out of the water, I was completely addicted to it. And I couldn't wait to do it again and again. And the paddling I've done since then, and actually helped my core strength to the point where it released the pressure on the nerve in my neck. And I've never had a problem with it since. So I'm a believer in stand-up paddling. It's healed me in a lot of ways. So
that's a great story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I know that feeling of paddling off or falling off a lot. That is definitely when we did the first crossing, we got incredibly bad weather, and it was 4 to 6 foot seas. And here we had been training for a year, and I bet you between the 4 of us, we fell off over 200 times.
Yep.
And you see like beginning paddlers get frustrated when they fall, and you're like, no, you want to fall. You're doing the right thing,
Right. You have to know how to fall in order to learn how to paddle. And that's the truth. And I know a lot of people who I'm thinking about my friend Roxanne. I hope she's listening tonight. But when she first started paddling, she never wanted to fall. She would clench her toes and hang onto that paddle, and she never wanted to fall. And it became such a fear for her that it actually held her back. And we actually had a lesson once where I think I made her fall off the board like 5 or 6 times, just so that she could learn to get back on the board and have the confidence to know that falling is fine. If anything, falling is fun. Falling gets you wet. It cools you down. It's refreshing. And we got to do it. We got to be able to take those knocks, in order to have the fun and the glory that we have out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever gotten yourself into a really hairy, kind of dangerous situation with being out on the water?
Oh yeah. So I'm a New Yorker, and I paddle year round up here. I love it. I think I love it in the off season even more than I do in the summer, because the bays are empty, right? The ocean is empty. There's no boat traffic. There's nobody else out there. And it's incredibly beautiful. So one year, maybe like 2 years ago, it was March, and I went for a lengthy paddle, and I was in a rush that day, and I just wanted to get on the water. And when I got there, it was like perfect glass. So I didn't put on this is a really stupid story. I didn't put on my dry suit, which I know I should always have because the water is cold in March. I didn't put on my dry suit, and I didn't, I just wasn't geared up properly. I had on a yoga outfit and a fleece over it and my boots and some kind of probably ski gloves or something. And I went for a paddle because it looked beautiful out. And I got the furthest distance from my start point that you could get. I was probably 3.5 miles from home. And
Right.
I turned around, and I remember looking and saying, the water looks a little textured over there. And within 2 minutes, the entire world had shifted, and I was getting hammered with a side wind, and it turned into 2 to 3 foot side swells on my board. And I had 4 miles to go by myself. There's nobody else out there. I don't have my phone with me. You know what I mean? I'm up a creek pretty much. And I fell in a couple of times. I just got thrown off my board, and the wind came up so hard at one point that I actually had to I paddled into a beach. It was a deserted beach. And just to turn the nose of my board back into the wind so I could get back on the board and paddle in the direction I wanted to go in. It was a complete, just not a good situation. And when I got back to my car, my husband came looking for me because he saw that the weather had shifted. And so he was at my car. And when I got to him finally, I was slurring. I couldn't speak properly from, hypothermia. And I just literally couldn't even get my board up on the truck. It was a mess. And if I'd been out there another 20 minutes, it probably would have been pretty ugly. So, ever since then, even, I have a wetsuit, I have all the gear, I make sure that I'm super protected, even if I feel like it's overkill, because you never know. You never know when the ocean's going to change up on you, and it's in charge, not me.
Yeah. It can change quickly. I've been caught in a couple hairy situations too, where I was up at the Carolina Cup last year. Yep. And I was on a stand-up paddle surfboard, and I was one of the only guys out there. It was kind of right before sunset. Everybody was closing down with the event. And it went from being a super fun, waist to, waist to stomach high wave. The tide was getting perfect. It was the most amazing evening surf sesh. I'm like, I've never surfed in North Carolina. I thought it was so cool. And then out of nowhere, what I later came to find out from Reynolds Wolf, one of our paddlers from the Weather Channel, this microburst. It's like this type of wind condition that happens after a front passes through. All that the front moves through, and then it can happen days later. this wind that is racing and sprinting across the surface of the land, especially in coastal areas where it's flat.
Yep.
It came racing across the island. It started pushing out to sea. You know, it was a direct west wind.
Wow.
I was getting blown out to sea. I could not paddle hard enough to get in. I mean, they recorded that day that there were gusts up to 63 miles an hour. And it wrecked like all the tents on the beach with the event. I was out there getting pelted with the water because it was literally the waves went from stomach high. And when that wind hit it, it stood them up to head high waves.
Right.
And they were trying to break over the sandbar, but when they would lip up and curl, the top of the waves would literally get sheared off by the wind. And I'm out there and I realized I couldn't paddle in standing up because the wind I was like a sail. It was so strong. But when I got down on my knees, I could make a little bit of headway. It took me 20 minutes to get into where the waves were breaking. I got dumped so many times, and every time I went off the board, the wind would flip the board up there like a potato chip. Thank goodness I had a leash on. And it was just the craziest scenario. My eyes were swollen from the salt water hitting me in the face. When I got close enough, when I finally made it in past the break and I got close enough to the beach, the sand was pelting me. And it was just, I went from having like this beautiful surf session to being in one of the most intimidating, nearly, if I had not been a strong paddler, it could have been a very life-threatening situation to a lot of people if they were just out there, because it would have blown them out to sea and it was getting dark, right? I mean, it just was you would have gone and gone and gone. And it was crazy.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. I mean, that sort of reminds me of that recent, I don't know if you saw it on the Inertia, about those 7 surfers that literally, I think five of them didn't make it. And it was just a freak show of an accident that nobody has ever seen before, but it's significant out there. And those microbursts, I've been around the beach in a couple of those, and that's impressive. It's impressive that you were able to paddle in. Thank goodness, Travis, right? Because that's what happens. Is people get carried offshore, and then what?
Yeah, it was one of the most physically challenging things of my entire life, being especially on a board, for sure.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just good that people, keep in mind safety is always, so important. I mean, we really promote safety, as our number one priority with people training for the crossing and making sure that they're following every step possible. We actually have a safety video that we made for training on our YouTube channel. And so, well, we touched on a couple things just to shift gears about, how you came into this role. And I'd love to kind of hear from you, what that transition looked like, because it's kind of amazing, landing where you've landed and taking over here and really taking Stand Up Journal to the next level as the editor.
Well, thanks, Travis. If you had told me like 6 years ago that I would be owning this magazine, I would have thought that was the most hilarious thing ever. I didn't see this coming. It's literally a point of like just connecting the dots that were of opportunity that were in front of me in my life that led to owning a magazine. So I guess, when I left my teaching career, I didn't have a plan in my head, and I wound up that summer, that friend of mine who taught me how to stand up paddle, he hired me as a instructor for stand up paddling for this surf shop that he owned. It's called Main Beach Surf and Sport here in East Hampton. And so I started working for him, and he was really great with me. Like, he just let me create programs, like anything I wanted to do. He just gave me the equipment, and he gave me the space to do it. Like, it was really a wonderful time, and paddling was just really exploding here in New York. So that was really successful for me. And I was just really blessed. I had this perfect opportunity where I had a gigantic toy shed that wasn't even mine, that I could do whatever I wanted with and, explore options on the water. So So I really got into that. And then somewhere in there, I had my first, and that's actually a story I wanted to share later, but I had my first stand-up paddle race. And I sort of fell into it sideways, backwards, never intended to ever do a competitive sport in my life. And then, I wound up becoming a stand-up paddle racer, which became all consuming for me. Like once I discovered the competitive bone in my body, I just was consumed by it, and completely loved stand-up paddle racing, completely obsessed by it. So, and that was successful for me for many years. Like I have a good sense of business in some ways. So I was able to combine the stand-up paddle racing with giving clinics, offering some yoga workshops, doing some retreats. So I started making a living being a stand-up paddle instructor, which is not easy to do when you live in a cold water climate like New York. So, but I was making it work year round. Like it happened. And then somewhere in there, might have been at that Carolina Cup you're talking about, it might have been the previous year's Carolina Cup. I hurt my back, and it was, just sort of an unfortunate thing. I pushed too hard, and something happened. And so I started to realize like I needed to look for the next thing, that I was in my 40s. I mean, how successful can you be as a stand-up paddle racer in your 40s to make a living for yourself? And I just started thinking about what else I wanted to do. And I didn't have a clue, but one day, and this is the true story, one day I opened up my email and I was sitting there on my computer, and there was an email from Stand Up Journal, which was then owned by Clay Feeder, and they were looking for an assistant online editor. And when I read the email, I kid you not, I thought that I know those guys, right? So I thought they were joking with me, because the email completely described me perfectly. Like it said everything but Evelyn Doherty, please respond, And I literally, like, it was sort of one of those moments where I was like, what's happening here? Like, this is too much to be a coincidence. And when I read the email, it was like my whole heart opened up and my entire being said, yes, like, that's it. That's the next thing. And I went after it, and it wasn't easy. Like, they had like 80 applicants, and I had to go through 4 different interviews and submit writing samples, and then another interview, and one thing led to another. But I knew the whole time that I was going through that, I was like, that job is my job. Like, like there's nobody else is ever going to have that job because it's mine. And I don't think I've ever gone after anything with that much personal power, and they hired me, right? And so when I got hired not as assistant online editor. They just turned it around and made me online editor. So I worked for Clay Feeder for 3 years, I think, and I was trained by a really smart guy who worked for the team then, named Adam Champagne. And Adam literally taught me everything that I know. Like, he just was super patient. He was the back end. He built the website and, talked to me about how to write articles and SEOs and all that stuff. And Adam was just incredible. So I learned everything there was, I could possibly absorb from him. And then I started getting involved with other aspects of the magazine because I loved it. Like, I just loved what I was doing. So I got involved with selling ads, and then I got involved with, some of the print stuff. I just started like taking over until like it seemed like the next natural step would just be like, I need this magazine. Like, I need to own this magazine because it's become such a personal obsession. And Clay Feeder was ready to step down, and so we kicked it around for a while. We came up, with a plan on how to do it. And there were some bumps in the road there, but we got it done. And, and next thing you know, like literally on one day, I'm shaking Clay's hand in Maine. And I go home that night as the owner and publisher for a magazine with, as I've mentioned this to you before, my experience. Like, people ask me all the time, like, well, what's your journaling experience? What's your publishing experience? I was an 8th grade English teacher. That's pretty much the experience behind what I do. But I also learned from the best. Like Clay Feeder was very successful in what he did, and I really was mentored by him well, and Adam Champagne, and I have a great team, with Russ Scully as my associate publisher, and Jeff Henderson is the creative designer, the creative director of the magazine. And between the three of us, the three of us sit down and hash things out all the time, just to, you could just say figure out the most basic stuff. But we're friends. We're all water lovers. We do it because we love it. So, that's how I got here. I never imagined that this is where I'd be sitting. But just one quick story about that. So, way back when I first started stand-up paddle racing, this is a true story. I opened up a copy of Stand Up Journal before I even knew what it was, and I saw an ad in there of a young woman sitting in a truck with rain on the windshield, and it said something like air temperature 53 degrees, water temperature 47 degrees. Do you go? And then underneath it says like, hell yes, And that ad was a woman who I really admire named Karen Wren, and it was in Stand Up Journal. And literally when I saw that, like I knew I wanted to be like Karen when I started racing. And so like all these little dots just sort of lined up in order to put me in the seat. So that's a long story, but that's pretty much how we got there today.
It's a beautiful story, and I love. It's like your own hero's journey too. I love how you really charged it, and that energy that you bring to life. It's so apparent. I love the comments we have coming in. Tatiana said, "I need Evelyn to train me for the 2021 crossing."
Yeah, Tatiana knows that I would love to do that. So that just means several trips to Florida, right? No problem.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeremy of Inlet Property is here, where we broadcast the show from. He said you rock on the mic. I just wanted to share that.
Oh, that's important. Thank you.
You're a pro. So at this point in this stage of the game, as an entrepreneur and as leading the way with this media source, what's the hardest part of the job? Deadlines,
right? So none of us want to deal with deadlines, and that's the very boring answer. There's a ton of content out there. What I love about my job is I get to talk to fascinating, amazing people like yourself, Travis, who inspire me so much. So we have so much. We have an incredible cache of professional photographers, surfers, stand-up paddlers, you name it. And the core team, myself, Russ Scully, Jeff Henderson, the three of us are all essentially just kind of surfers at heart, and none of us want to handle a deadline. We just want to do what we want to do and then come work later. So just the discipline of putting things together. One of the things I had to learn was, as a publisher, is you have to hit the deadlines. Otherwise, it's just one thing leads to another and you're up a creek. So the biggest challenge is definitely that.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think that's really great advice for a lot of people out there working on different projects. With us, with producing events, it's definitely a major. We like to call them strategic deadlines. It kind of makes it sound a little more intentional. Deadlines, just the word deadlines, it just sounds scary. But a strategic deadline makes it feel like a little bit more, it's okay, it's strategic. It's because we're doing this on purpose. We're
right.
Scheduling our own suffering here.
Yeah, right. So, just this week, just today, as a matter of fact, we just sent the summer issue of Stand Up Journal to the printer. And so literally the last 14 days have been, I don't think I've moved away from my desk for more than maybe an hour or two at a time. It's just, it's a lot, when you put together, it's quarterly, you put together it's a masterpiece, right? That's what that's what I want it to be. It's a masterpiece 4 times a year. So, and if you're sort of exacting like I am, and I'm really particular about, this, that, and the other things. So it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, but we love it.
So as far as the content that you guys are meeting these deadlines for,
yeah.
What is the overall theme or intention, or what is your vision in terms of the content that comes from Stand Up Journal?
So that is my favorite question. So Stand Up Journal, I didn't buy a magazine in order to be like every other magazine, right? So my vision is I want Stand Up Journal to be a platform that has 2 prongs, right? So one prong is it's the hub of a community, right? So I really want it to be a place where we can receive ideas, we can receive articles, we can receive photographs and turn around and make something beautiful out of them. And then the other idea is that Stand Up Journal for me is a place where I get to do what I love most, and that's where I get to highlight people like you, right? And people like, the Piper's Angels Foundation and all the amazing warriors that do this 80-mile paddle. I get to highlight people like you who are doing radical stuff on the water and literally using your powers for good. And I'm so inspired by that. Like I love the ocean, I love water sports, and I love people, right? So when I hear stories, the inspiring stories of people who are doing just incredible things, and they're using water sports to inspire other people to help, right? To help others, to help the environment, to help themselves, sort of thing. A lot of people tell a lot of healing stories about how paddling has helped them through difficult times, through cancer treatments, through, just rough times in their life. So for me, it's like if I get to, all I want to do is capture those stories and share them so that we all get a little uplifted. Like I'm uplifted by them, but I also want other people to feel that way too. And ultimately, the bottom line is the more people that we can inspire to come to the water, right? Just to come to the water and maybe participate in it, then those people, the more people we can get to come to the water, hopefully they'll fall in love with it if they're not already. And if people fall in love with the water, then they'll be inspired to protect it. And that's really where Stand Up Journal sits, right? Is I really want it to be a voice of advocacy for the environment, specifically marine life, ocean health, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I saw on the website that, as far as environmental stewardship, there's a section where you feature different environment, topics and stories and content, from eco boards and ice caps and climate change. People are literally paddling around the ice caps, which to me is pretty amazing and mind blowing. And you're around a lot of amazing athletes. You're around a lot of inspiring people, and you see these kind of stories from all over the world. Is there one example that really stands out to you in terms of just a really inspiring story of somebody, or maybe it's in relationship to their own personal journey or in relationship to the environment? Is there one that you can think of that really stands out that you'd like to share?
Wow. I don't know, Travis. They're all so super inspiring. I would say, all right. So, okay, I got one. So one of my many heroes in the sport of stand-up paddling is Chris Burdish, right? And Chris Burdish is that crazy guy who got it in his head that he could paddle from Morocco and South Africa across the Atlantic Ocean to Antigua. And he did it, right? In 2017, Chris paddled from one side of the Atlantic Ocean to the other, and he did it in order to raise money for certain causes, right? So when I first got wind of Chris, that he was getting ready to do this 4,000-mile journey, literally the thought in my head was like, no way, this guy's never going to make it. And then I did my background check, right? I started researching who he is and what he'd done before. And he's an incredible legend of a big wave surfer. And he won the Mavericks big wave contest in 2010, the year that the surf was so big that it was washing spectators off the cliffs, right? And if anybody remembers that, it was like so crazy. And Chris won it that year. And so he's a lifelong waterman. He's been a yachtsman. He's crossed the Atlantic a million times in various crafts. And I realized, like, if anybody could do this, like, it was this guy, right? Like, it was this guy. So I started really paying attention. Specifically, what I love to talk to Chris about is his mindset. Like, it's not just the physical prowess of how do you get across the Atlantic Ocean, but man, that is a scary thing to do. He was out there unsupported and completely solo for 93 days. Like, he was there through Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, right? Like, there was so many holidays going by that, and I was just thinking about this crazy guy out on the ocean, like across the Atlantic. And so for me, what's so inspiring is Chris always said that he was able to do what he did because of his why, right? His purpose, his deeper meaning. And for him, it was not about getting across the Atlantic for, prestige and accolades. It was about the awareness he was bringing to these causes, creating funding for schools in South Africa and, funding for food for children, lunch money for food in South Africa, as well as offering money to kids who had cleft palates, being able to have corrective procedures for those cleft palates. So he said whenever he felt like his ability was diminishing, he would go back into his why and he would think about those kids, and that he would realize he wasn't doing it for himself, he was doing it for these other children that, that needed help. And lo and behold, 93 days later, I'll never forget, I was sitting in Puerto Rico. I was with friends down in Rincon, Puerto Rico, glued to my computer because Chris Burdish was like 40 miles offshore. And towards Antigua, right, which is a few islands further south. And sitting there that day and realizing that the guy was going to make it, he was going to make it 4,050 nautical miles by himself across the Atlantic because he loved these kids so much that he wanted to do something to help them. Yeah, I think that changed my life forever. Like, if we just find that deeper meaning, and it's the same with the crossing for cystic fibrosis, right? If you have that deeper passion in you, that you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it to be of service in some way, then there's a deeper well of strength that we get to pull from. And and those stories, and then the stories about the crossing for cystic fibrosis are just as powerful. I could talk about, listen to, and regurgitate those stories all day long. Like, if we could do that 24 hours a day, I'd be a happy gal. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. Yeah, I remember when Chris was doing that, and I remember having the same feeling of just like, wow, I know the feeling of paddling just 80 miles in a straight period of time, which is challenging enough, and you experience certain levels of pain, it definitely pushes you to the limit in terms of pain threshold, whether it's your feet are burning, your muscles are fatigued, you're just tired and exhausted and you're ready to quit. And that's where I think, what Chris did and what this journey with the crossing, it really does signify, and it's symbolic of people with cystic fibrosis. Once they're diagnosed, from the time they're a child and they have symptoms and they, get hospitalized or they're doing their treatments, they know that it's like they never get back to the beach and be done with the pain. They have to stick it out, and every day brings a new reality, a new challenge. And that's what's so amazing to me and inspiring about people with cystic fibrosis, and why I love to celebrate their divinity. I love to celebrate their warriorship.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so powerful, right? I mean, all those stories are just incredible. And I know that that's what I've heard from several of your paddlers, right? That they say to themselves, like, this is a finite amount of pain, right? And or discomfort that one has to go through to cross 80 miles from Bimini to the Florida coast. But what they think of are the real cystic fibrosis warriors who, you know, it's not finite, you know, that every day is another day to rise up and face the challenge. You know, those people inspire me to no end, you know, like I'm not even sure how to even address that, but it's, you know, in order to be able to learn from each other like that is in my book, everything, you know, I mean, Travis, you and I have talked about, like, briefly, you know, about how, you know, like, consciousness is cool, and reflecting on, you know, just reflecting on life, reflecting on other people's suffering, right? And being able to sort of navigate that in a way that makes us larger, try harder, you know, be a better person. You know, that's for me, that's the story of life, right? So, you know, if I can surround myself with people that ask me to dig a little deeper on a regular basis, to, you know, become everything that I can in order to be of service to this earth and this world, I'm in. You know, I'm 100% in, and you know, I can't say enough about it. You know, I was thinking when I was preparing for this show, you know, about one of the things that happened for me as a stand-up paddle racer is I started to really choose my events not based upon, like, WPA points or the rankings of whatever, the rankings of stand-up paddlers across the world. I started choosing my events based upon the amount of heart that was in the event, you know, and it's hard to quantify that, but, you know, an event like the Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis would be top of the list, you know. And for me, another one is and I've talked to you about this, the Sea Paddle New York City, you know, that 24-mile round Manhattan crazy paddle that's, you know, to help kids with autism have surf therapy experiences and also to raise money for the environment. You know, those causes that give us so much inspiration, I just allow us to perform better, you know, allow us to show up and really be a part of something greater than just who we are individually. And I love it. You know, I love that feeling, and I love being a part of a team like that.
Well, and you are a beautiful soul, Evelyn. You bring your heart and your spirit and your joy, and I love it. I love the epic love you bring to the world.
So fun to talk
so
about.
So we're wrapping up. We've got a couple more minutes left in the show. Anything on your mind that you would like to share with the audience, or any final thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I didn't get to ask you any of my questions, Travis Suit, and that is a problem. But we'll get back to that. But I did want to just mention, you know, as I was thinking about this show, I was literally thinking about what are actions that represent this epic love, right? Like, you know, I always say that if we build a container, then people, you know, most people, I believe, want to do the right thing. They want to do good, for lack of a better word. But sometimes people don't know how to get there. Like, they just, you know, need inspiration, or they need somebody to sort of give them a structure, like Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis, and then they can jump in and be a part of something that's so beautiful. And I was thinking about, like, what are, like, simple acts of love and action that people can take on a day-to-day basis. And at first I was, like, stumped. I was like, okay, that's a big question. And then I realized, like, it's so easy. You know, for me, it's something like, and this is a new practice for me, like, when I come to this is going to sound silly, but when I come to a stop sign, I come to the full 3-second stop. And I do that. That's my act of love. That's my action, you know, because when I come to a full 3-second stop, I'm taking care of everybody around me. Like I'm keeping an eye out for every single person coming from every direction because I love you, man. Like whether I know you or not, whether you're speeding or not, whether you're going in the same direction to me or not, I love you and I want to take care of that person. So coming to a full stop and then moving through. Or going to the grocery store and refusing to buy any produce that is encased in plastic, right? That's my other like act of love, right? Like I just go there and I stand there and I'm like, well, I guess I'm not having any cucumbers or broccoli for a while, you know, and I'm going to go over here and get a handful of string beans and some garlic and I'll figure that out. Like, but it's an act of love, right? Because I love the planet. I love the universe. I don't want to see any more plastic in my oceans. So, you know, just to encourage people to think about like, what are those little tiny actions that we can take every day that fill us with that spirit, right? That fill us with that heart that makes us proud of who we are and also inspires us to like, you know, share with others. Like this is what I'm doing to just sort of show my spirit, you know, show my love for the universe and for one another. Yeah, you know, we all want to take care of what we've got. And you know, the last thing I'll say is, you know, one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my life is that, you know, our life is the gift, right? This is such a gift. So anything I can do to protect it, to nurture it, and to share it is the best thing that this human, you know, can do with her time on this planet.
I love that. And that was how I felt about Piper's diagnosis. You know, the biggest challenge I think for people, parents, to accept about, you know, a genetic disease, especially because your genes, what you have passed on, are what ultimately affect the child. And from the point of diagnosis in the kind of dark cloud you go through and this transformation that you have to go through, a metamorphosis of experiencing that pain, that sadness, that sorrow, and finding a way to understand and be aware of how the most tragic things that can happen to you in life can lead to the most triumphant outcomes. And to me, that's what the crossing, that moment when you see people hitting the beach, when you see CF warriors paddling 80 miles across the ocean and hitting the beach, and that outpouring of love and energy, you know, this show, Epic Love, my perspective on the world, who I have become, how I've transformed as a human, as a father, all thanks to Piper, all thanks to my sister Leanne, the diagnosis they face, the suffering that they go through it's been incredibly transformative. And so I thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your love here. Now, before we go, you did mention you had a couple jokes. Now, I don't know if you've got them prepared, but I know DJ Jason has his dad jokes prepared. If we want to end on a comedic note, we could have a joke off.
I'm ready.
So I will let you go first. Even though I am an epic jokester, I am still a gentleman. So I'll let Evelyn go first.
Oh, that's easy. All right. So is it just one joke per person?
I mean, I've got 3 lined up, so that's up to you. If you want to go one-on-one, I can try to pick my favorites. So
head to head.
I have 3. I can do 3.
All right. So 3 on 3. This is a 3 on 3 team.
All right, we're gonna let the crowd decide. So the audience chime in at the end of this joke off. What is the best joke? Who told the best joke? I want to hear it. Okay, let's do it. Evelyn.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I just need to say, right, so this is the bad joke off, right? So it's not the best joke, it's who's got the worst joke. That's
the bad joke, everyone you got.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. So what do you call a deer with no eyes? What do you call a deer with no eyes?
I don't know.
No idea.
Very, very good.
That was pretty good.
Very, very bad. Very bad. Yeah.
All right. So Evelyn, what do you call two monkeys who share an Amazon account?
An Amazon account?
Yeah.
I don't know. Chimp Amazon something. What?
Primates.
Oh, primate.
That's my kind of joke. That's good.
Wow, those are good ones. Those are good ones. Evelyn, do you have another one?
Round two.
What do you call a deer with no legs and no eyes? Do you know? You know it.
No.
Hey, what do you call a deer with no legs and no eyes? Still no idea.
She got an advantage on me. She's got a whole theme here.
She did. She has continuity. I like it. She's got a whole show.
So let's see. So I saw a snake that was 3.14 meters long. I think it was a python.
Oh, it took me a minute. I was never that good at math. I got
No, it's because I got an English teacher here. That's why, you know.
a python.
3.14159.
Oh, it's so bad. I love your bad jokes. They're so good. All right, one more. Ready? Okay. So
You have another one?
I have one more. Why do all Eskimos do their laundry in Tide? Why do all Eskimos do their laundry in Tide?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because it's too cold outside. Hey, those are my 3 favorite jokes.
I love those. Oh my gosh.
All right, so my last one.
My cheeks hurt.
My last one. So Evelyn, would you like to know where I get all my dad jokes?
Yes.
I get them from the database. This her face is even better than the reaction. So
I want to.
Yeah,
Can we just have a joke off epic love show? Like.
yeah, 100%. I like it. I like it.
Oh my God.
Well, thank you. Well, whoever's out there listening right now, we'd love to hear your comments, feedback on which was the best joke. I see Leanne is laughing at all of them. Well, thank you very much, Evelyn and Jason, for the joke off, the 2020 Epic Love joke off. That was fantastic. And it was a very funny way to land the plane on the show. Well, Evelyn, it's always a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time we can do this again. And you always bring your best, so thank you.
Thanks, Travis, and just keep doing you. I still, at some point, I want to hear the story about the bull riding, right? That's in the future. I want to hear about your bull riding career and how that plays into who you are today. Like, I look forward.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it a career, but it was definitely a wild ride, and there was nothing more exhilarating than getting on the back of the bull. So I'd be happy to share that with you sometime.
Cool.
Maybe we should go ride a bull together.
Oh my God.
Not like, you ride a bull, and then I'll ride a bull.
Electric bulls, maybe.
Yeah, those are actually sometimes harder to ride than the real ones.
That's a bunch of bull.
Well, thank you again, and thank you to everybody out there listening and tuning in. Please check out Stand Up Journal online. Look out for the next the next issue coming out, and follow them on Instagram and Facebook. And what else?
Instagram, Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we also have our website, which you have up there, which is great. And if anybody ever has like an idea or a comment or a great photo, you can always reach me through writing to me. Send me an email, editor@standupjournal.com. I would love to hear from you guys. Yep.
Got it. Leanne said, order mine just now. She's on it.
She's
Thanks,
so
Leanne.
sweet. Great. I love
All right,
that.
everybody. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thanks,
Sending you
Travis.
love all the way from Florida to New York. And we'll see everybody next week on the Epic Love Show.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Travis. Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Yeah.
Is it off? We're muted on here. So I was talking to Ayana. That's a major problem.